most people can get through the morning just fine. It's the night that becomes the problem. As the day winds down and distractions disappear, something shifts inside the brain. The urge for alcohol doesn't just return, it intensifies. It gets louder, more specific, more urgent, and for many people, it happens at almost the exact same time every single evening. Understanding why this happens requires looking at what the brain is actually doing at night, and why nighttime creates almost perfect biological conditions for cravings to take over. So why do cravings so often arrive at the same time every night, even on days when there's been no stress, no trigger, no obvious reason? Because the brain doesn't just respond to what's happening, it predicts what's about to happen. Research on circadian biology shows that repeated behaviors create time-stamped associations in the brain. Neural circuits begin anticipating a reward based not just on place or emotion, but on the specific hour of day. This is the dopamine system at work. And here's the part most people don't realize. Dopamine isn't only released when something pleasurable happens. It fires in anticipation of it. If alcohol was consistently consumed in the evening, the brain starts releasing dopamine before the first drink ever arrives. Environmental cues reinforce the pattern. The couch, the TV, the dim light, the shift from work mode to rest mode. Over time, the brain doesn't think of alcohol as a choice made at night. It becomes woven into the nighttime sequence itself. The craving isn't random. The brain learned that nighttime is when the reward arrives, and it starts preparing hours in advance. But here's what makes nighttime uniquely dangerous. It's not just that cravings are stronger, it's that resistance is weaker. The prefrontal cortex handles impulse control, planning, and the ability to override automatic behavior. It is the brain's braking system. But throughout the day, that system is constantly working. Every decision, every emotional regulation, every distraction managed. All of it draws on the same cognitive reserves. By evening, those reserves are lower. This is sometimes called decision fatigue, and research consistently shows that the brain becomes more likely to seek immediate relief when it's mentally depleted. Alcohol fits that pattern with almost perfect precision. Fast-acting, familiar, and neurologically predictable. When the brain is tired, it gravitates toward what it already knows works. The craving might not actually be stronger at night. The system responsible for resisting it is just significantly weaker. But here's where the biology becomes especially revealing. Cortisol, the body's primary alertness and stress hormone, follows a natural daily rhythm. It peaks in the early morning to help the body mobilize for the day, then gradually declines as evening approaches. As cortisol drops, mental sharpness decreases. The nervous system begins shifting toward recovery mode. The sense of go that carried the day starts dissolving. For people who repeatedly used alcohol in the evening, the brain begins associating that low-energy, cortisol-depleted state with the expectation of chemical relief. The quieter the nervous system becomes, the louder the craving gets. On top of this, stress that accumulated throughout the day no longer has anywhere to hide. During busy hours, the brain stays occupied. At night, when stimulation drops, unresolved tension resurfaces, and the brain remembers exactly what it used to reach for. The craving often isn't about wanting alcohol. It's about the brain recognizing the state it's in, and reaching for the thing it learned relieves it. This is where it becomes counterintuitive. Cravings often feel loudest, not during moments of stress, but during moments of stillness. Nothing on the agenda. Nothing demanding attention. Just a quiet room and a mind that doesn't know what to do with itself. The neuroscience here is specific. When the brain has been conditioned to expect a dopamine reward at a certain time, and that reward doesn't arrive, it enters a state of reward prediction error. It expected stimulation. The stimulation didn't show up. That gap generates restlessness, irritability, and mental fixation, especially when there's nothing else competing for attention. Boredom amplifies this effect because the brain has fewer inputs to redirect toward. Attention collapses inward, toward the missing reward. The quieter the environment becomes, the louder the conditioned craving is allowed to be. But cravings aren't purely chemical. There's another layer most people don't think about. The hippocampus and amygdala, brain regions involved in emotional memory, store not just what happened, but the emotional context around it, what it felt like, what it followed. Over time, alcohol gets tagged to specific emotional states: relief after a hard day, comfort during loneliness, escape from anxiety. These associations become deeply embedded. At night, many of those exact emotional states return, replaying conversations, sitting with unresolved worry, feeling the weight of things unfinished. The amygdala recognizes the pattern, and it sends a signal. Last time this happened, alcohol changed how this felt. Not because it solved anything, because it temporarily interrupted the state. The brain often isn't craving alcohol itself. It's craving the emotional exit alcohol once provided. So why do nighttime cravings tend to feel the most intense, specifically during the first weeks of quitting? Because the brain is still running the old prediction model in full. The environmental cues still exist, the routine still exists, the emotional triggers still exist, but the expected reward no longer arrives. This creates a period of neurochemical friction. Dopamine signaling feels lower than baseline. Stress sensitivity rises. Sleep becomes harder. The evenings feel empty in a way that's difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. At the same time, the brain hasn't yet built new pathways for relaxation, reward, or stress regulation without alcohol. Research on extinction learning, the process by which conditioned associations weaken, shows this takes consistent repetition over time. The brain must experience the cue, expect the reward, and have the reward fail to arrive repeatedly before the prediction begins to update. In other words, it has to be uncomfortable for a while before it gets easier. The craving feels unbearable in early weeks because the brain is completing a pattern that no longer leads anywhere, and it hasn't accepted that yet. So what actually causes the nighttime craving to lose its grip over time? Not willpower. Repetition without reinforcement. Every evening, the brain encounters the old cues, and the reward doesn't arrive is another data point. The dopamine anticipation tied to those cues begins to decay. This process is called extinction learning, and it's gradual, nonlinear, and requires patience. The brain slowly updates its model. Nighttime no longer reliably predicts alcohol. Evening quiet no longer reliably means relief is coming. The emotional triggers no longer automatically route to that one specific solution. New associations can form in their place, but only if something else begins to occupy that neurological space. Movement, routine, social connection, sleep timing, any repeated behavior in the evening window begins building a competing prediction. The craving fades not because the brain forgets, but because it slowly stops expecting. The deeper insight here goes beyond alcohol entirely. The brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. A large portion of daily behavior isn't driven by conscious decision-making. It's driven by learned expectation, what usually reduces stress, what usually brings reward, what usually ends discomfort. The brain is constantly trying to conserve energy by automating those predictions into reliable routines. That system is efficient. It makes life faster and less effortful, but it also means that repeated behaviors can become deeply embedded well before a person consciously realizes how automatic they've become. Nighttime cravings make that system visible. The circadian rhythm, the cortisol curve, the depleted prefrontal cortex, the dopamine anticipation, the emotional memory, all of it converges in the evening hours. All of it points in the same direction. And the most important thing to understand is this: the brain isn't asking for alcohol. It's completing a sequence it has rehearsed hundreds, sometimes thousands of times. The sequence was built to feel natural. It was built to feel like need. But needs can be rebuilt. Sequences can be rewritten. The brain that learned one pattern has the same capacity to learn another. Alcohol cravings intensify at night because multiple biological systems converge at the same time. The dopamine system anticipates a reward it was trained to expect. The prefrontal cortex, depleted from a full day, is least equipped to push back. Cortisol drops, and accumulated stress becomes harder to ignore. Emotional memory recognizes the state and signals for the familiar response. And the quieter the environment becomes, the more attention narrows toward what's missing. None of this is weakness. None of this is lack of resolve. It's the brain doing exactly what it was conditioned to do, at exactly the hour it was conditioned to do it. What feels like an overwhelming craving at 9 p.m. is often the brain running a prediction it learned hundreds of nights before, and predictions can be updated. The brain didn't choose nighttime randomly. Nighttime was when it learned the craving was supposed to be answered.